Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a lone engineer moves into his uncle's quiet lakeside home, he expects peace. Instead, a ruthless HOA he's not even part of declares war, paving his lawn in concrete, sending threats, and igniting a battle that will expose corruption, spark a movement, and shake the system to its core. When I first moved into my uncle's old house near Lake Thurmond, I thought I'd finally found peace. After years of working on military contracts, living out of motels and airfields, I was ready for something simple. Mornings with coffee on the porch, evenings spent fixing the roof. The kind of quiet that hums like an old radio left on low. The house had been in my family for decades, sitting proudly just outside the boundaries of Bentwater Grove, a pristine little development full of identical lawns, gossip, and matching mailboxes. My uncle used to joke that the best part about this property was the line on the county map that said not subject to HOA. It felt like freedom on paper. 2 weeks after I moved in, that freedom got its first test. I found a white envelope wedged into my front gate, sealed with an official-looking HOA logo and too much self-importance. I remember thinking it must have been a mistake, some mix-up in mail routes, but curiosity beat out optimism. I tore it open and read, Notice of Violation, Unmaintained Lawn, Fine, $550, Payment due within 5 days. Failure to comply will result in measures to standardize the visual appearance of your property. I read it twice. My coffee went cold before I finished the third read. I'm an engineer. I don't deal in nonsense. So I did what engineers do. I documented. I pulled out my land deed, my uncle's old survey maps, and a fresh county GIS printout showing in crystal clear black lines that my property sat outside Bentwater Grove's jurisdiction. I even took photos of the little metal sign my uncle had posted years ago. Private property not part of HOA. I stapled the evidence to a short but sharp letter and mailed it to the HOA office. Certified. Return receipt requested. I also emailed a scanned copy to the HOA address listed on their website and even dropped off another in their office mailbox for good measure. It was bulletproof. 5 days passed. No acknowledgement. Then 10. No response. The silence didn't feel like ignorance. It felt like arrogance. That's when I decided to prepare for the worst. I installed 2 new security cameras along my fence line and a motion-activated system near the driveway. Old habit, when people start ignoring paperwork, they tend to start showing up in person. On the 7th morning, I caught sight of a black SUV creeping past my driveway twice. It slowed each time, tinted windows, a camera flash visible through the windshield. I stood on the porch with my mug in hand, watching it like a man observing termites in the foundation, small, persistent, and guaranteed to become a problem. I knew enough about HOAs to understand how they work, layers of committees, self-appointed enforcers, and at least one Karen with too much free time and a God complex. That night, I did another sweep through the HOA's charter, which was publicly available online. Bentwater Grove's boundary ended exactly 50 feet before my property line. I wasn't just outside their rulebook. I was a different country. If they wanted a war, they'd have to cross a border. By the end of that week, I started noticing small intrusions. A flyer tucked under my windshield wiper. Friendly reminder, keep our neighborhood beautiful. A voicemail left by someone identifying themselves as Bentwater Grove Compliance Team, asking me to discuss landscaping improvements. I didn't return the call. Instead, I emailed them one final time, attaching the county's zoning certificate and stating in exact legal language that any further contact would be considered harassment. I signed it, dated it, archived the whole exchange in a folder labeled HOA Idiocy. That should have been the end of it. But the way these people operated, it wasn't about rules or lines on a map. It was about control. And I could feel them circling, like bureaucratic vultures looking for a soft spot. The problem was, I don't have one. So I waited. I kept my cameras rolling, my papers organized, my coffee strong. Somewhere deep down, I already knew this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was the first tremor before the concrete started to pour. It was just past 6 in the morning when I heard the low groan of a diesel engine outside my window. At first, I thought it was a delivery truck. Maybe the roofing supplies I ordered had shown up early. But as I pulled back the curtain, the sight that greeted me didn't fit any version of reality I was prepared for. A concrete mixer, bright orange and roaring like a jet engine, was parked halfway on my front lawn. Two men in neon safety vests and hard hats were guiding a thick hose, already spewing wet gray cement in a controlled stream across my grass. For a full 3 seconds, my brain refused to process it. I blinked like I was watching a hallucination, like maybe I hadn't really woken up yet. Then I saw the neat wooden stakes pounded into the soil, the string lines laid out with contractor's tape, the freshly dug trench that ran the entire length of the property's street-facing edge. That wasn't just concrete. They were pouring a damn foundation. I was out the door in under 30 seconds, throwing on boots and grabbing my phone. I hit record before I even made it down the steps. "Hey, what the hell are you doing on my lawn?" One of the workers glanced up, startled. He was holding the hose like it was a fireman's rig, his boots already splattered in gray. The other one, older and heavier, stepped forward and lifted a clipboard. "We're just following work order specs, sir," he said, not sounding confident. I kept the phone pointed at his face. "Whose order?" Bentwater Grove HOA. They paid in advance. Said it was part of a street-facing beautification plan." I nearly dropped the phone. "This isn't part of your HOA. This is my land, and I've got the deed to prove it." "Did you even check whose property this is before you started pouring?" The younger guy stopped the hose, finally, but not before they'd laid down what looked like 10 feet of concrete, perfectly straight, like a sidewalk to nowhere. The older one looked flustered now. "We were just told to install a concrete border. Said it had to match the rest of the street. You're, lot 32, right?" "I'm lot 0, I snapped, "because I'm not in your damn subdivision. I'm across the damn road." He squinted at the clipboard, then at the mailbox, then back at me. "Shit," he muttered. I called the cops right there on speakerphone while they watched. "Yes, I'd like to report a trespass and property damage in progress. Yes, they're still here. Yes, I have it all on video." While I waited, I walked the perimeter, filming everything. The hose snaking across the lawn, the trench, the mixer, the stakes, every piece of evidence. The workers had started packing up by the time the cruiser arrived. Small town response time. Not bad. The officer stepped out, looked at the scene, then looked at me. "You called it in?" "Yep," I said, handing him my ID and the video on my phone. "They just poured concrete on my private property under the direction of an HOA I'm not even a member of." The cop walked over to the workers, took their IDs, and asked the usual questions. They repeated what they told me. They were following a work order from Bentwater Grove. It had an address, mine, and a check from the HOA's operations account. The cop raised an eyebrow when he saw the paperwork. "Did it occur to anyone to verify property lines before tearing up a lawn?" "I guess we just assumed," the older worker said sheepishly. "All the other houses on this side got the same order. It looked consistent." Consistent. That word rattled around in my skull like a loose bolt. That's what they were trying to do, make me consistent with the rest of the neighborhood. Problem was, I didn't belong to their neighborhood. I was the reminder that not everything around here could be tamed. The officer gave me a nod. "Do you want to press charges?" "Not yet," I said, keeping my tone measured. "But I want a full report filed, and I want every detail documented. Names, footage, invoice, the truck plate, everything." Back inside, I backed up the video to 3 locations, emailed my lawyer, and uploaded the most damning footage. Workers saying, "Bentwater Grove HOA paid for this," to a new YouTube channel I created on the spot. The title was simple: "HOA pours concrete on my lawn without permission." By noon, it had 20,000 views. By nightfall, over 70,000. The comments ranged from furious to amused to downright vindictive. Apparently, I'd struck a nerve with everyone who'd ever suffered under a petty HOA regime. Later that evening, I poured myself a bourbon and stepped outside to look at the damage. The concrete was setting fast, neat, level, professionally done. It would have been a nice job if it wasn't completely illegal. A single strip of gray right where my grass used to grow now lay like a scar across the face of my property. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't incompetence. It was a message. And if they thought I was the kind of guy who would roll over and let them set the tone, they had no idea who the hell they were dealing with. The next morning, I woke up to an email from the Bentwater Grove Homeowners Association with a subject line that read, in all caps, "Notice of completed compliance measure," the kind of bureaucratic smugness that practically leaks off your screen and drips onto your floor. Attached was a PDF titled Formal HOA Improvement Statement. I opened it, and with every line, my blood pressure rose like steam through a rusted valve. It read, "As part of our ongoing community enhancement initiative, the Bentwater Grove HOA has taken the liberty of initiating landscape standardization measures on neighboring properties that significantly impact the visual character of our subdivision. Your front-facing property, which lies adjacent to our community entrance, had been selected for an educational demonstration. We believe this intervention serves both a corrective and inspirational function. Accordingly, you are hereby invoiced in the amount of $2,800 for professional concrete and aesthetic landscaping services." I had to reread that sentence. Educational demonstration. Like I was a lab rat in their little experiment. They dumped concrete on my lawn, on land they don't even own, and now they wanted me to pay for the privilege. Scrolling further, I saw a section titled Future Actions. It included vague threats of additional adjustments if I failed to maintain compliance with HOA aesthetics. One line in bold stood out. Non-participation may result in further integration efforts. Integration. That was the word they used, like I was some wild frontier being forcibly annexed. I fired off an email to my attorney, a woman named Lila Ramirez, who once helped a friend of mine in Georgia dissolve an entire HOA over misuse of funds. She wrote back in 15 minutes flat. "Get me everything. The footage, the emails, the HOA charter, the deed. I'll put together the cease and desist today." But I didn't stop there. I was done playing defense. I took that email and posted it online right under the original video. Within hours, the story spread like wildfire. Reddit picked it up first, then Twitter. HOA horror story groups began tagging news accounts. By evening, my face was being used in a TikTok where some guy in Oregon did dramatic readings of HOA letters while pouring concrete into his sink. I turned on the local evening news just in time to catch a segment titled, "Homeowner's Lawn Poured Over by HOA He Doesn't Belong To." They showed drone footage of my property, the concrete slab gleaming like a middle finger under the South Carolina sun. But the real treat came in the form of a television interview. The HOA president herself, Karen Whitmore, decided to step into the spotlight. She stood in front of a fountain at the Bentwater Grove entrance in a red pantsuit, hair sprayed to hell, speaking with the authority of someone who'd read Robert's Rules of Order and thought it made her a judge. "We believe in unified curb appeal," she said, smiling with the teeth of a crocodile. "While Mr. Dowell's property is not technically within the boundaries of Bentwater Grove, it lies directly adjacent and thus directly impacts our neighborhood's overall presentation. Our board made a unanimous decision to take corrective action, and, frankly, I believe he should be grateful." Grateful. She finished her little press tour by holding up a laminated photo of my house, pre-concrete, circled in red marker like it was a mugshot. This kind of unkempt frontage is unacceptable. I was standing in my living room with a whiskey in one hand and a baseball bat in the other. I wasn't even sure why I had the bat, but it made me feel ready. That night, I joined a live stream panel about HOA abuse. Half the panelists were homeowners, the other half were lawyers, activists, and one guy who just really hated fences. My video had hit 200,000 views, and every HOA tyrant in the country seemed to be crawling out of the woodwork. But the best thing that happened that night was the email I received just after midnight. It was from someone who claimed to be a former Bentwater Grove board member. The subject line read, "Karen's history. You're not her first target." The message was short and pointed. She's been doing this for years. Check the last 3 HOA budgets. Look for unscheduled enhancement initiatives. Look into the landscaper's license. He's her nephew. And ask why none of the board votes are recorded in meeting minutes. I stared at the screen, heartbeat steady, mind turning. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. But not the kind they were used to. No late fees, no yard sign complaints. I was going to hit them in their soft spot, money, legality, and exposure. And I wasn't alone anymore. By the time Monday rolled around, Lila had filed the cease and desist, along with a formal demand for removal of the concrete and restitution for property damage. We weren't playing softball anymore. I gave her the full packet, the deed, the zoning map, the camera footage, the email from Karen, and the anonymous tip about the landscaper. She reviewed everything and told me flat out, "We're not just going to stop them. We're going to gut this HOA like a rotten fish." I like that about her. Meanwhile, the story kept snowballing. Local papers picked it up, then regional ones. A guy from the Post and Courier called me for comment. I gave him the quote he wanted. They paved over my lawn like it was a public sidewalk, but it's not. It's mine. That wasn't a beautification project. It was trespass, fraud, and a power trip with a concrete mixer. That afternoon, we served Bentwater Grove HOA with official notice of my lawsuit. The claims were serious. Unauthorized entry and modification of private property, criminal trespass, vandalism under state code, misuse of HOA funds for projects outside their jurisdiction, attempted extortion through fraudulent invoicing. I also requested a court-ordered forensic audit of the HOA's operating account for the past 3 years. If Karen had used community money for her little compliance crusade, there was a chance it went deeper than just my lawn. And it did. 3 days later, Lila called me practically giddy. They messed up, Mike. They really messed up. We subpoenaed their banking records. There are multiple transactions flagged as beautification projects, none of which show up in board meeting minutes. Thousands of dollars funneled to the same contracting company. I didn't even need to ask. The nephew. Bingo. Registered under a Shell LLC in Charleston. The kicker? The LLC is registered to a residential address, and that address belongs to Karen Whitmore. That same night, the Post and Courier ran a front-page feature, Concrete Justice, HOA President Under Fire for Rogue Beautification Project. It included a side-by-side of my house before and after the pour, along with a pulled quote from Karen's TV interview where she said, "He should be grateful." Public opinion flipped fast. The HOA's Facebook page was overrun with comments, most unprintable. I heard from a local contractor who told me he refused work in Bentwater Grove after they tried to stiff him on payment last year. More homeowners from within the HOA started reaching out. One couple said Karen had fined them $500 for planting rose bushes in the wrong color family. Another guy got a citation for leaving a rake leaning against his shed for more than 48 hours. People were scared of her. Some even thought she had connections inside the zoning office, since complaints against her always vanished. But the big moment came when we attended the first pre-trial hearing. Karen walked in with a small army of lawyers, all in matching suits, looking like she was running for Congress. I wore jeans, boots, and a button-down shirt that still had drywall dust on the sleeve. Lila showed up with a rolling case that clacked when she pulled it, full of paperwork, emails, screenshots, and bank statements. We laid out our case. Karen had ordered a construction project on private land she had no authority over, paid for it using funds she controlled, then demanded reimbursement through intimidation. She weaponized her HOA presidency to target non-members, exploited community funds without oversight, and used family contractors without disclosure, all while pretending she was helping the neighborhood. Their side tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding. That's when Lila dropped the bomb, an email chain between Karen and her board treasurer where she wrote, "I don't care if he's technically outside the boundary. That lawn is visible to everyone who drives in. We'll correct it, and he can thank us later. If he complains, hit him with an invoice and let him pay for the lesson." The judge requested a recess. Outside the courtroom, one of Karen's lawyers pulled Lila aside. I saw them talking in low tones. When Lila came back, she was smiling like a cat with feathers in its teeth. They want to talk settlement. I shook my head. We're just getting started. And we were, because now we had something better than a lawsuit. We had leverage. They wanted this to go away quietly. I wanted it to be heard loudly. Later that night, I went out with a buddy and bought a drone. I flew it over Bentwater Grove at sunset, capturing the perfectly aligned cookie-cutter rooftops and the sharp contrast of my property, one house that refused to kneel. I added the footage to my YouTube channel under a new video titled, "They Tried to Standardize Me." I standardized my lawsuit. It hit 50,000 views by morning. I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating like it was trying to escape the nightstand. 4 missed calls, 2 voicemails, 1 text from Lila. "Check your fence." I pulled on a hoodie, stepped outside, and stopped dead in my tracks. Spray painted across my wooden front fence in thick red letters was the phrase, "You don't belong here. Leave while you can." The paint was fresh. It dripped down the boards like blood from a wound. I took a slow breath and pulled out my phone. I didn't feel fear. Not exactly. It was something colder, something surgical. I checked my camera feeds. At 2:43 in the morning, a vehicle had pulled up without headlights. The The figure was barely visible in the dark, but motion blur caught the swing of an arm and the glint of a spray can. The plates weren't readable, but the shape of the car looked familiar, a black SUV. That wasn't the worst part. The next afternoon, just after 3, I was out back unloading tools when I caught the smell of smoke. I turned and saw a column of black rising from the side of the garage. My stomach dropped. I ran. A plastic trash bin was up in flames, fire licking the siding like it was hungry for drywall. I grabbed a hose, turned it full blast, and doused the blaze in under a minute. My siding was scorched, and the smell would linger for weeks, but the house was intact. This time, the cameras got everything. Infrared footage showed a man slipping through the gate. Same SUV parked down the road. He pulled something from his jacket, tossed it into the bin, and lit a match. Real amateur hour arson. I sent the footage to Lila, then called the police. The responding officer recognized me immediately. Let me guess, Bentwater Grove again. Just a coincidence that their HOA's president is the one suing me, and now someone's trying to light up my garage, right? I said flatly. They took the video, pulled stills, and promised to run plates against vehicle registrations. I didn't wait. I posted the clip online with the title, "Attempted Arson Following HOA Lawsuit. Is This Retaliation?" It went viral before dinner. By nightfall, a local crime reporter contacted me for an interview. I gave it to him. Then I went further. I called up an old contact at a tech conference who now ran a property rights advocacy channel. He wanted an exclusive. I gave him that too. The next day, the police made an arrest. The man caught on camera was Charles Kenner, Karen Whitmore's assistant and HOA enforcement liaison. He'd been hired just 6 months ago, had no formal job description, but had been seen attending board meetings, posting violations, and now, apparently lighting trash cans on fire. When police searched his vehicle, they found 2 more cans of spray paint, a fake maintenance badge, and a crumpled HOA map with my house outlined in black marker. It looked like a damn hit list. He was charged with attempted arson, destruction of property, and making criminal threats. The local news station aired the body cam footage of his arrest, paired with a slow-motion replay of my surveillance video. Karen refused to comment. Her lawyers issued a bland statement about disavowing any illegal activity and cooperating with law enforcement. But the damage was done. Within 24 hours, HOA board members started jumping ship. The treasurer resigned, citing ethical concerns. The secretary stepped down. A former board member posted a public letter on Facebook claiming Karen had been pressuring members to look the other way on finance matters and threatening them with removal if they spoke out. Lila filed an emergency motion to expand our lawsuit to include criminal conspiracy, harassment, and reckless endangerment. We also filed for a temporary restraining order against the entire HOA leadership. The judge granted it the same day. Now they couldn't come near my property. They couldn't issue statements about me, contact me, or send anyone from the board onto my land without facing contempt charges. I had the law, the press, and public opinion on my side. And for the first time since this insanity began, I saw something new in the eyes of those HOA board members. Fear. Real, naked fear. That night, I stood on my porch, watching the security feed play back the moment Charles Kenner got yanked out of his SUV by police. I poured myself a drink, leaned against the railing, and allowed myself a single dry laugh. Karen had started this thinking she'd teach me a lesson. She was right about one thing. There was a lesson, but it wasn't for me. Courtrooms have a smell. It's somewhere between cold coffee, old books, and bad decisions. I'd been in a few before, mostly for expert testimony on material failure in federal contracts, but never like this, never as a plaintiff. Never with my own property on the line. The courthouse was packed. Not just reporters and legal aides, but residents from all over the county. Some I recognized, some I didn't. A few nodded at me with quiet respect. One guy handed me a thermos of coffee and whispered, "Give 'em hell, man." Karen Whitmore strutted in like she was walking into a board meeting, not a public trial. Hair perfectly curled, face stiff with Botox, suit sharp enough to slice drywall. But her eyes darted. Her lawyer looked exhausted, or maybe just resigned. Lila stood beside me in a navy blazer, tablet in hand, with the calm focus of someone who'd already mapped out every move on the chessboard. She leaned in. "We go for the jugular today." The hearing began with our amended claims: illegal property intrusion, malicious damage, unauthorized use of HOA funds, harassment, and now criminal conspiracy, and incitement. The judge, a silver-haired woman with zero patience for theatrics, asked for opening statements. Karen's lawyer gave the usual waffle: miscommunication, community aesthetics, a regrettable misunderstanding. He claimed the concrete pour was a well-intentioned beautification project that unfortunately lacked due diligence. He even called it a teachable moment. I nearly laughed. Lila's turn. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She laid out the timeline like a surgeon opening a ribcage. She showed the jury the aerial maps, cadastral records, the original warning notes stuffed into my fence. Then came the video. The concrete truck churning away, my confrontation, the worker saying, "We're here for HOA Bentwater Grove." The room went silent as the footage rolled. Then the cherry on top, the email. Pulled from HOA servers via court order, dated 4 days before the concrete incident. Karen had sent it to her inner board from the official HOA account. Subject line: neighborhood standards, visual deterrent. Body: he wants to play stubborn. Let's give him a front yard he'll never forget. We'll call it landscaping. Tell the crew to be quick and neat. We're showing him and the rest what we expect. No more trashy holdouts. The judge asked her to confirm the email's authenticity. Karen's lawyer tried to squirm around it, claimed the account had open access among board members. The judge asked directly, "Ms. Whitmore, did you write this email?" Silence. Then, "I don't recall." It was the worst possible answer. Next came Charles Kenner's testimony, the HOA goon caught on tape attempting arson. He'd been offered a reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation. What he said blew the doors off. He confirmed Karen had personally instructed him to keep pressure on me, that he was paid off the books, that she gave him a burner phone to avoid traceable communication. He admitted to delivering threats, defacing property, and even placing a fake HOA violation sign on my lawn the week before the concrete pour. "I didn't know he wasn't part of the HOA," he said, almost sheepish. Karen said he was a troublemaker, and we needed to make an example. The courtroom murmured. Then came the financial audit. Turns out Karen had been using HOA funds like her personal slush pile, authorizing payments for landscaping companies, off-book compliance incentives, even writing checks to a company owned by her nephew. The concrete contractor who poured over my grass. Her nephew, business registered to a P.O. box. No license on file. The auditors said at least $34,000 in unapproved projects were linked directly to her. The judge recessed for deliberation. Outside the courtroom, reporters surrounded me. I gave a simple statement. All I ever wanted was to be left alone. They poured concrete on the wrong man's lawn. When court resumed, the verdict came fast. Karen Whitmore, guilty of property damage, conspiracy, misuse of association funds, and incitement to commit a crime. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Her board members, the ones who signed off or looked the other way, each received between 5 and 8 years depending on their involvement. The judge ordered Bentwater Grove HOA to be formally dissolved. Remaining funds would be held in escrow for community repairs and restitution, and then came the final ruling. I was awarded $480,000 in damages for the destruction of property, the emotional toll, the legal fees, and the invasion of my life. As the gavel dropped, I let out the breath I'd been holding for what felt like months. The war was over, but I wasn't done yet. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was restless, but because for the first time in months, I could sit on my porch and feel silence that wasn't poisoned. No engines rumbling before dawn. No cameras blinking from hedges. No HOA patrol trucks crawling by pretending to be neighborhood watch. Just the sound of crickets, lake wind, and my own steady breath. By morning, I was in the cab of my old excavator, the same one I'd restored with my uncle back when I was still learning torque ratios in trade school. I'd parked it behind the barn months ago, told myself I'd get to it eventually. Now it was cleaned, fueled, and ready. I turned the key. It roared like a war cry. Neighbors gathered across the street, unsure what was coming. A few were still bitter HOA loyalists. Others had started to realize what kind of dictatorship they'd let fester under the illusion of order. Most just stood quietly, holding coffee cups and camera phones. I didn't say a word, just drove straight onto my concrete lawn and lowered the arm. The first crack sounded like thunder. Slabs split, chunks flew. That gray scar of forced compliance fractured like a brittle lie. With every sweep of the claw, I peeled away their arrogance inch by inch until nothing remained but shattered remnants of their vanity. It took 3 hours. At the end of it, the lawn was mud. Raw, beautiful mud. I stood in the wreckage with grease on my face and dust in my hair and smiled for the first time in weeks. Then I got to work on something else. The sculpture was my own design, cast in solid steel, 300 pounds, welded by my own hands at the fabrication shop I rented near the highway. I bolted it down into the exposed soil right where the concrete had been. 7 feet tall, weatherproofed, with a polished plaque that read, "This land is not HOA. This land is law." Within an hour, it was on Reddit, then Facebook, then syndicated by the same local station that first aired the footage of the pour. Someone tagged me in a post that simply read, "This man just built the Statue of Liberty for homeowners everywhere." That afternoon, CNN called. By week's end, the full story aired nationwide. They spliced courtroom footage with my excavation clips, added drone shots of the sculpture, and even did a slow-motion zoom on Karen's face when the verdict dropped. I watched it once, then again, then turned off the TV and went outside to breathe. But the story didn't end with a headline. I started getting messages, hundreds of them, then thousands. Emails, letters, calls, people from Arizona, Ohio, Florida, even Alaska. They shared their own stories, illegal fines, fake liens, surveillance, bullying. Some had lost homes, some had been silenced, some had just given up. I couldn't ignore it. With help from Lila and a few local attorneys I'd grown to trust, we set up a nonprofit, Freeland Defense. Its mission was simple: legal assistance, document education, and tactical support for homeowners bullied by out-of-control HOAs. We set up a website, pro bono case review, and a database of every known HOA abuse case we could find. Within a month, we had 32 active cases under review, 3 of them from former members of Bentwater Grove, who had also been victimized by Karen's correction campaigns. And then came the final act. The old HOA office, a prefab structure set at the entrance of Bentwater Grove, was officially vacated under court order, bank accounts frozen, assets seized. I bought the land at county auction for $1, and on that plot, I put up a billboard, black background, white bold font. "This land is no longer under Karen's control and never will be again." People took selfies with it. Somebody made t-shirts. It became a meme, then a movement. And me. I went back to rebuilding my uncle's house, one beam at a time. But now, when I walk across that lawn, I don't just see where concrete once smothered the grass. I see where I stood my ground, and where others can too. It's been 1 year, 12 full months since I stood in a courtroom and watched a woman who tried to pave over my life get sentenced to 15 years behind bars. 12 months since the HOA that tried to tell me how to mow my own land was erased from legal existence. And yet sometimes when I'm out by the lake, hearing the breeze sift through pine trees and not a single threat hanging in the air, I still have to remind myself, it's over. But not for everyone. The truth is, what happened to me in Bentwater Grove wasn't a fluke. It wasn't some isolated Karen-driven madness. It was just one story in a pile of hundreds, thousands. People who've been harassed, fined, extorted, surveilled, and even physically threatened by the very neighborhoods they thought were supposed to protect them. That's why Freeland Defense didn't just survive. It exploded. We started with 3 volunteers and a broken folding table in a strip mall near Columbia. Now we've got 2 offices, 4 attorneys, an entire research wing, and more cases than we can handle. We've helped shut down 5 abusive HOAs, pressed charges in over a dozen fraud cases, and forced 3 municipalities to re-examine how much unchecked power they give to community boards with no state oversight. Last month, I was invited to testify before a housing ethics panel in D.C. I wore the same shirt I had on when I filmed that first video, faded, oil-stained, and proud. I told them exactly what had happened, from the first envelope on the gate to the last chunk of concrete in my excavator bucket. They tried to ask if maybe I'd exaggerated. I slid the printed photos across the table. "This," I said, "is what silence buys you. You ready to pay that price?" They had no further questions. Karen. I don't think about her much. She's in a state prison now, last I checked, serving time for fraud, arson, conspiracy, and misuse of public funds. Her name pops up in news blurbs now and then when another HOA horror story surfaces. She's become the poster child for everything broken in that system, and maybe that's where she belongs. But I'm not here to gloat. Not anymore. Because these days, I don't wake up to threats. I wake up to peace. The house my uncle left me, fully restored. Every plank, every window, every stubborn rusty hinge sanded down and made whole again. The porch swing creaks like it used to when I was a kid, and the trees throw shadows in the exact same places I remember from summers long gone. The sculpture still stands, weathered now, vines creeping up the base, but the plaque shines like the day I installed it. Tourists drive by sometimes just to see it. One guy asked if he could propose to his girlfriend under it because it meant something. I said yes, of course, even polished it up for them. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd just paid that $550 fine. If I'd rolled over, told myself it wasn't worth the fight. But then I remember, they poured concrete on my land. They thought they could erase me. They didn't know who they were messing with. Now I sit on my porch, morning coffee in hand, and I look out at my lawn. Green, untamed, beautiful. It's not perfect. It doesn't need to be, because it's mine.